right. I think everybody is starting to get in from the waiting room. Excellent. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody, and thank you all for joining us today. We're really excited to be hosting our second virtual student career panel session hosted by the Scripps Corporate Alliance. And today we have three panelists with us today from Scripps Science. And before I hand it over to them and let them talk more about their company and introduce themselves, just wanted to give a little bit of housekeeping items and a quick overview of the agenda. So this is a Zoom meeting, which I'm sure you've all been participating in plenty lately. I would just ask that everybody keep themselves muted and keep their video off, at least during the presentation portion, so that way we can minimize any echoes or any background noise, connectivity issues. After the presentation portion, we will have plenty of times for Q&A and discussion portion. So I would ask that you can either ask your questions through the chat function down at the bottom icon in the middle of your screen. And if you'd like your question directed specifically to one of the panelists, just enter that in as well. And I will be reading off the questions to the panelists. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask a question directly, that's great too. I would just ask that you kind of either use the raise your hand icon or use the clapping icon or whatever fun reaction you like to use. So that way it gives us a heads up and I can direct the question and hand it over to you as well. So with that, I am very excited to introduce our three panelists from Scripps Science, which is a company that gives marine operators the data management, analytics, and modeling needed to better manage ocean risk. And they're currently focused on the aquaculture sector. So we have with us today the co-founder and CEO, Jonathan LaRiviere. We have the co-founder and CTO, Evan Goodwin, who's also a Scripps alumni. And we also have Grant Cavanaugh, who is the director. And I just realized I forgot to introduce myself. As your host and moderator, I'm Vanessa Scott. I work in industry relations and innovation at Scripps Oceanography. And with that, I'll hand it over to the Scripps Science team.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And it's really fun to be on a call with so many oceanographers. Oh no, here we go. My cell phone. Great to be on a call with so many oceanographers. I am trying to figure out if I would say I am an oceanographer. If I say I was an oceanographer, I was a paleoceanographer. I met Evan in graduate school while I was working on my dissertation that was focused on Pliocene and Miocene climate, and I was, in the lab doing compound-specific stable isotopes, and I did that for years. But I think, as is often the case when you're in graduate school, like as you start to finish up and look out on the horizon for the path that you're going to take, sometimes there are these alternative paths to postdocs and the academic route that can kind of catch your attention, and it did for me. So after finishing my PhD, I started working on Scripps Science nights and weekends with Evan and another co-founder, and eventually went full-time at Scripps Science in January of 2018. I will have more time to talk about my background. I'm going to pass the baton over to Evan.
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's great to see so many familiar names. Really excited you could all join. Yeah, so John and I met back at UC Santa Cruz, where I did my master's in physical oceanography. And the whole time I was there, I really had that hardware and instrumentation focus. And then coming down to Scripps, I worked in instrument development group working on the spray glider program. And I'd been there for the past, 6.5, 7 years or so. And yeah, it's this has been what started as a passion project for us many, many years ago. It's slowly grown and taken shape, and it's really been taking a lot more momentum over the past year or so. So it's super exciting to see it grow, and yeah, happy to be here.
Cool. I'll go real quick. I'm never was nor will be an oceanographer. My name's Grant Cavanaugh. I'm on the board of Scoot. And my academic background, I've got a PhD in agricultural economics from the University of Kentucky. And I worked there with a group that built new types of insurance and other financial risk transfers around novel indexes all around the world. So paid by the Gates Foundation or the World Bank Development Project or similar sorts of international development focused institutions to develop new types of risk transfers that would service low-income communities around the world to transfer kind of geophysical risks. And these days, you know, my day job, I work at a hedge fund called Nephila. Specifically, I work at Nephila Climate, which is the group within Nephila that works on everything on a whole bunch of risks that sit outside of the framework of traditional catastrophe modeling. So Nephila as a whole is about a $11 billion insurance, reinsurance, and derivatives group that takes money from pension funds all around the world and puts it to work as the capital standing behind risk transfers related to also, you know, geophysical type processes. And a lot of that is focused on hurricanes and earthquakes. Those are the kind of bread and butter for the world of insurance when they're thinking about risks that are geophysical to property around the world. But there's this whole suite of things that sit outside of the traditional suite of modeling tools that companies use to address those two core risks. And I sit on the team that manages those. So my PhD dissertation was about transferring ocean risk indices. And so that's kind of how John and I first connected some years back. And yeah, and so I'm not necessarily have much to say about what it means to be an oceanographer, but a lot about the links between oceanography and wider markets around the world.
Great, thank you guys so much. So I think Jonathan, did you want to do a brief overview of Scoot Science and screen share?
Yeah.
Great.
Let me do this. So I'm going to bring up the slides, the slides that often end up as standard, you know, kind of standard pitch deck slides for Scoot Science, or, you know, when we're talking to investors, or slides that we use a little bit with customers when we're trying to give them a sense of what we do. But I want to say, I want to merge this a little bit with company origin story, because I think it'll be helpful for the crowd that we're talking to. You know, in the beginning with Scoot, the feeling that we were kind of chasing down, that when Evan talked about this passion project, right, is that Evan and I and another graduate student at UCSC linked up around this idea that there's value in ocean observing data. So Evan came from a hardware background, and he was like, man, look at all the hardware that's sitting idle, and look at all the data gaps we have. I would love to get more hardware in the water and fill data gaps in. And when I was working on my dissertation, I worked mainly with time series from ocean cores, and I felt like, oh man, we're not treating this data like the spatial data that it is. And so I started moving time series into you know, kind of map-based representations of ocean conditions, and we linked up around this idea that, like, oh, there's so many problems with ocean observing and ocean data that we would love to see solved. We can see all these solutions for them, and someone else has to care about this. And so we started thinking that Scoot would be, we started a consulting group that would work for academic research labs, and we would, would help them manage their data. And, you know, in the process, the very early process of thinking about what would it take to start a consulting company, we learned some basics of running a business, one of which is customer discovery, and really diving in and seeing where the major pain points are for customers that you think you can serve. And so the early couple of years for Scoot Science was just talking to lots and lots of potential customers in, I'm going to call it maritime, right? Anyone that we thought was somehow an operator that touched the ocean, we thought ocean data could be valuable. And then we had these conversations. The initial ones were really like, we think ocean data is valuable. Is it? And then, we'd listen to what they said. And it helped to set some course in some direction for us. And we saw, oh man, there's actually some recurring pain points here and a much bigger opportunity than just a consulting company. We actually think that there are pain points in lots of different industries that we can knock down with some product development that we do in-house and then actually could release to a whole bunch of stakeholders. And in that process, some friends from Scripps that worked in the hedge fund space, advised us on how the finance world was using ocean data and where they found value in ocean data. And then we found Grant's dissertation, where he was looking at, can you trade off of ENSO risk? Are there ocean risk indices that could be kind of decorrelated risks for the finance world? And that was really intriguing. So we connected with Grant and some others at Nephila to learn about how they use ocean observing data. And it was actually that group that said, the aquaculture world approaches us and says, hey, can you help us get some protection around extreme ocean events like low oxygen water masses or harmful algae blooms that kill our fish? Can you help here? And by and large, Nephila would have to say, well, no, we don't know about the oceans, right? We don't have the background in ocean science to help you generate a risk profile for oceans. And that set us on our course with customer discovery and aquaculture, and really started to chart the path for Scoot Science. So now we have this group at Scoot Science, and we are giving aquaculture operators modeling and data analytics and data management that can be used to manage extreme ocean events like harmful algae blooms and low oxygen events and extreme temperature swings. And I think for the overview of Scoot, I'll show you one of the first individuals that we talked to that was farming, that was actually growing fish, is this guy, Dean Trethewey, the production director at Grieg Seafood in British Columbia. Grieg's the 6th largest salmon producer in the world. Dean, we think, is responsible for, on the scale of 150 to $200 million of fish living in the waters of BC. And we connected with him right after they lost $8 million of fish over the course of one day. Because of a harmful algae bloom. And we were saying, hey, we think ocean data is valuable. Is it valuable? And they just had this big loss, and we learned over and over again, extreme ocean events kill fish. And largely the farms kind of have to respond to the events. They don't have much lead time for the events, even though they could do some mitigation if they knew an event was coming. And they have tons of ocean observing going on. They're kind of in response mode. So they have sensors monitoring temperature and salinity and oxygen. They have ADCPs deployed. They do ocean modeling, but mainly they're in response mode. And we found, we thought, oh, we can probably help here. We found that the problem had a ripple effect. So kind of the farms had these high mortality rates with fish. There were these acute events where almost $1 billion of fish was lost over a few months in Chile in 2016. They were paying really high deductibles for their insurance and not getting much coverage. And then when you start to talk to the insurers, you find out that the insurers don't really have an understanding of the ocean risk, and they feel like they're not getting a good good transparency on the ocean data and the data coming back from the farms. So it's, it's a tough market for the insurers. And then the ripple effect is that it means it's hard to bring outside capital into the aquaculture world because you have a really capital intensive industry with unconstrained risk. And that's where we felt like, okay, this is a first opportunity for Scoop. And so we kind of a two-phase solution to this. And the first was really digging in with the farms and understanding with them the risks on the water at their sites. So we do data management and dashboard building to help them understand all the data streams that they have coming into play on the farm and the surrounding ocean observing, from federal ocean observing efforts and surrounding meteorology, give them kind of a unified view of the ocean conditions, and we're starting to do some short-term forecasting with them on the farms. And that's sort of the first phase. That's what we're in now. And then the second phase for Scoot is really with all that we learn about how these operators are affected by ocean risk, getting into risk modeling and finance so that we can really look at how the ocean conditions couple to the business problem itself. And so Scoot will be moving into a space where we can help to provide more insurance cover for ocean risks, help optimize site selection, and help facilitate new investment in the aquaculture space. And that's what we do. I'll show you, I think, if I flip, you can tell me, can you see a dashboard now? Yeah, okay. So I'll show you, it's just a little bit of the work that we've done. For example, with Greek seafood, we have a lot of sites in British Columbia running different sensor systems. And, some of what we've done is just take the sensor data, and I think this data goes back to 2009, oxygen, temperature, salinity through the water column, and help to show them the profiles of the water column instead of what they typically will do is look at, 10 time series overlaid on each other and have some intuition for what that means about ocean conditions. So we started giving them profile views, doing some clustering and classification of the data, bringing into the same place all their plankton monitoring. So they do extensive plankton work, bringing in other sensor systems at their sites, getting it all into one place, and then we started giving them plankton data, some maps of plankton risk around BC. We developed a new plankton risk index based on Grieg and other groups in the area have about 20 years of harmful algae monitoring data at all these sites through British Columbia. And we can start to break down for them in a typical year, here are the different species that show up and when they show up around British Columbia. And we've really just helped them get their heads around managing all these different data streams, doing some mapping, giving them some analytics, and then we've helped with new site surveys. So this is in Eastern Canada for a group called CERMAC. They wanted to start new farms, but they have this risk called super chill. Really cold water will freeze the gills of the fish. And they said, if we can get some ocean data, could Scoot just help us look at the data? And so we gave them a dashboard to be able to look at profiles of the data, assess, they can run some statistics on the data sets kind of in their browser instead of having to have, someone who's like, an R expert, like just, to give them just like, what was the average value for December of last year? And then we did some assessments of when the different sites sat in these really problematic cold temperatures. And that's, that's some of the work that we've done so far. And we're continuing on that track of building dashboards and then moving into, risk and finance in the kind of the short, medium term for Scoop.
Great.
That's it. Yeah.
No, thank you so much. And thank you all for your introductions and background and experience and that great presentation and overview. I think that's a great launch pad for the Q&A and discussion session. And unless you had something else to share before we open up for questions.
I don't I don't think so. I mean, some things I can see little notes here. Someone, Evan pointed out to say, you know, so this is all built in-house. So it was all the analytics that we do on ocean data. And we have a lot of internal tools that are not public facing. It's all done in Python with Jupyter notebooks, and then all those dashboards are React based web apps. And so we have an in-house software engineering team and a data analysis team. Really excited to say we've got you know, a lot of advisement coming from Scripps. So if you looked at like kind of the board of advisors we have, you'd recognize a lot of names out of Scripps that are helping us with our data analysis.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for that. And I think we will open it up for question and answer and discussion. So again, please feel free to enter your questions in the chat portion through the icon at the bottom of your screen. Or if you'd like to ask a question directly and unmute yourself, just again, please give me a little clap your hand or thumbs up, some sort of reaction, so we can get your question answered. All right, we've got some things coming in here. Okay, first question we have for the group. Have you investigated the market for carbon removal via macroalgae culture? Jonathan, would you like to answer that?
I can, yeah, I can. We have spent a lot of time looking at, so I put that really, you know, one of the emerging, I always call it maritime. I don't know if that's accurate, but let's say emerging market and maritime. So we spent a lot of time talking with groups, certainly for seaweed. There's a carbon removal aspect to seaweed aquaculture, but what we found is for a lot of groups, like really in these new markets where they are working to prove the new space and the value in the market, it was really hard for Scoot to also, who's also doing something new in the market, to be able to work with them and say like, have them as a customer that can help us understand if there's kind of long sustainable value in the work that we're doing. And so anytime that we've talked to groups on offshore wind or offshore tidal energy, or you know, kind of the carbon sequestration, I believe that the risk modeling, the ocean risk modeling and data analytics that that our team is working on in-house, I believe it's going to be critical to those markets. But right now we're focused on a market where, and even within aquaculture, there's already been a significant level of market maturity, right? So salmon, we started with salmon in aquaculture, and it's got a pretty high level of industrialization and maturity, and that is really helpful for us to get some proof points around the value that we're bringing to the table now. So I would like to get into those markets, but right now it's not a focus.
Great, thank you. All right, we've got another question that came in from Lindsay asking, how does your work-life balance with this career path versus others? Evan, you want to take that question?
Sure, I'll hop in. Seeing as I just came from Scripps, it was definitely a change. I mean, everybody's experienced a change over the past 6 months too, so I don't think this is totally representative of what it would actually be. For me, I guess it's been really, really good coming on, that I can focus all my attention here rather than just doing that nights and weekends thing. But in terms of work-life balance, I find that I have a flexible enough schedule. I mean, we all work remotely. We're spread around the country at the moment, mostly on the West Coast, and then a few in Colorado, Grant's in Illinois. Excuse me. And yeah, I think everyone has been really good at communicating. We use a whole bunch of different internal tools that we communicate with, like Slack and Asana for project management. And there's plenty of formal and informal communication that happens every day. I don't know, it's been really great to work with these guys and everyone on our team, actually.
I actually want to piggyback off of Evan there for a second, just to say, and Evan, Grant, and I all share this. We all have academic backgrounds. I feel like it's pretty common in graduate school to develop a pretty high in that work-life balance. Like, it's pretty easy to end up weighting the work part really highly, so that when you finish graduate school, it's you actually get to take a deep breath when you finish graduate school and say, like, oh, like there's like there's an opportunity to have some work-life balance. And I think even working on a startup, and actually Grant, you worked on, before Nufilla, you were at a startup too, even working on a startup where things are moving really fast, certainly fast relative to what I experienced in the universities, I developed such a high tolerance for being kind of like out of whack on work-life balance that it feels really good. Now, the other thing is I have a kid, and that's another maybe kind of jolt after graduate school. When you have kids, you get this jolt to the system that shows, oh man, like the work-life balance, it's less optional when you have kids around, right? You have to swing kind of into more balance to just take care of your kids. So for me, it's fast paced right now, but I think my work-life balance was maybe worse when I was in graduate school. And I do want to kick it to Grant, because you had time at a startup at Predicat. So I'm curious about your answer.
Yeah, I mean, my experience is a little hard to summarize, in the sense that nominally a lot of startups in the world want to prioritize work-life balance. Like that's an important thing that they offer, especially if they're competing against, say, Google or somebody else. That you know, if you walk around their campus, like there's clearly amenities to try and build in that balance. And if you're competing against them, then you have to address those issues. But at the same time, like if you're working at a startup and like things are due, like you know, I've had moments of like probably the same thing that you as graduate students would be very familiar with, of like, oh, computer simulation is down at 3 a.m. So I'm just gonna drive 8 blocks down and get it running again and do all that sort of nonsense. So like I definitely had that. Today, you know, I work with one foot in the world of asset management, so hedge fund type stuff, and then one foot in the world of insurance and reinsurance, in the sense that we're a hybrid group. And the world of reinsurance has a great work-life balance. It, you know, it's has a very like British Empire version of work-life balance built into the culture of reinsurance, insofar as, like, you know, Lloyd's of London still pays somebody to dress up as like a beefeater. And so any place that has like a beefeater on staff is probably going to also have various and sundry perks sitting around. So it really depends. You know, I kind of, that's on one hand. And then on the flip side is like some of our other competitors are also investment banks who classically have a terrible work-life balance. You get a lot of money, but you don't really get to see your family very much. So, I don't have a terribly overarching thing other than like, do your research on the specific industry that you're looking at, and the specific companies, and, you know, use some common sense to project out like what the circumstances that you're entering into are.
Excellent. We've got a lot of great questions. All right, we've got one here that's asking if you guys are working on the forecasting of extreme events.
extreme events relative is, I'm looking for the question. Is it just extreme events broadly? Yeah, right here. Well, you know, so extreme events in the aquaculture industry really focus around harmful algae blooms and super chill in Eastern Canada is these like really rapid onset of cold surface waters. And so we are working on forecasting extreme events in that in those categories, but I wouldn't say we don't have focus in the like more classic kind of climate and weather forecasting definition of extreme events. I don't know. It's pretty specific to the extreme events right now that kill fish, and they don't map as much onto what I typically think of as extreme events in the climate world. So anyone else have thoughts on that?
In the world of reinsurance, there's just a weird continuum of what constitutes an extreme event, right? Like a 1 in 500 year earthquake is something that a reinsurance company is capable of handling, but meteoric impact of the Chicxulub crater kind of size, that's too extreme for the reinsurance industry. And on a day-to-day basis, we're focusing on things that are much closer to the operational, like in any given season, we might experience this type of event. That tends to be the focus of insurance. You know, you can think in terms of how extreme is it to get into a fender bender and have to make a claim on your auto insurance? I guess it's kind of extreme. Like, hopefully we go years without doing it, but like, it's not that extreme.
I think that dovetails perfectly with this other question that was submitted, referring to the big sustained 6-week algal bloom that we had here off Scripps Pier and in Southern California, which impacted a lot of the marine organisms in our area and through our campus. And the question actually is specifically, are there any plans to work with Scripps to update their seawater management system and risk forecasting for future algal or water quality mitigation?
Evan, you had just been talking about this, why don't you?
I did. I'd heard anecdotal stories about impacts on the aquarium in particular. No, I don't think we have any direct plans to work with Scripps on this issue at the moment, but other industries are impacted by this too. I mean, one of the issues, for instance, at any place that has seawater intakes could be impacted by this. And I'm thinking, for example, the power plant up in Carlsbad. I didn't hear anything explicitly about this, but they have to take in water to cool their system. And as it comes in, they need to deal with all the algae and stuff that's in the water. So if their filters do get clogged, it causes an operational issue for them. They either need to turn off the power plant somehow, or very quickly fix that clog. So these are real issues that do impact industry around us.
Yeah, I think the power plant thing, several times a year, we've got instances of nuclear power plants around the world closing down because of jellyfish blooms and plankton blooms. So that's all we've always looked at for Scoot. There's this major advantage of working with the aquaculture industry in that it's like one of the most overlooked high resolution continuous ocean observing systems on the planet, right? There's aquaculture industry is a global footprint and has been collecting significant ocean data, shallow in the water column, but through the water column for years and years and years. And we have looked at that as a great way to sort of do risk mapping, do risk assessments, get kind of new insights into near coastal data with the aquaculture groups, and then have the risk maps and the kinds of understanding of a regional risk that then would let us move into an adjacent industry. So we look at I've been saying anything that has a saltwater intake, so it's desal or power plants, right? Like anyone who has a saltwater intake that's in the regions where there's some aquaculture presence, we kind of see that as a next step for Scoot to be able to say, well, we have good risk models for this area, and also I think as we develop good risk models for a region, it can actually promote development of new coastal infrastructure. So you could look at, there's a science fiction-y example, but Microsoft has done some experiments sinking data centers and powering the data centers with tidal energy and wind energy, and they see, oh, this is a great kind of futuristic way to manage our energy consumption and cooling. I guess our hypothesis is, well, if you have really good risk mapping for parts of the coastal ocean, then that's going to be, some of the best places that you could do those kinds of new cutting edge developments with coastal ocean infrastructure. So, eventually we'll get into these adjacent industries.
John, do you want to throw some spaghetti on the wall about like all the crazy ideas you guys have had about how theoretically in the future you could use this kind of information?
Yeah, I think that we have thought a lot about, I guess at its core, when you look at our team, the team comes together around strong commitment to sustainable oceans and improving, the relationship between humanity and the ocean. And with everyone coming from that starting point, when we look at the kinds of ways that people interact with the coastal ocean, we can see, oh, okay, if we can get numbers on oceanic change, numbers on climate change in different regions around the world, then it's going to start to give us a chance to optimize where you have development of coastal infrastructure, like where you, so for the data centers, for example, where are you going to put a data center? Well, one side of the problem is, where can you get a good constraint on the risk of turbidity flows? Where can you get a good assessment of internal waves that snap cables on offshore wind farms? Where can you get a good assessment of extreme events that kill fish, right? And say, okay, well, with that assessment, let's find the best place in the world to start this new fish farm, or to put a tidal. We look at, well, tidal energy development. When we look at wind energy development, subsurface data centers, telecommunication cables. Like right now, the traditional model is you kind of go to the oil and gas industry and the geophysical survey companies that work for oil and gas and say, hey, can you go do like one season of not even one season, can you do a cruise and get some sampling so that we could kind of get an assessment of the risk of where we're going to put these, these telecommunication cables that are extremely expensive. Well, I think that we should be able to help optimize where people do this, because there is sustained ocean observing happening when you kind of unify all the data that's available for the coastal ocean. But then the flip side of it is, we can also start to assess places that if you had development, if you had infrastructure going into the coastal ocean, it will it'll cause harm, right? And so we're learning about optimizing for the business, but also optimizing for the places. I can tell you, all the businesses that we work for so far have a strong commitment to sustainability. This is like through and through people that have spent decades and decades on the ocean, and I think that the goal isn't, oh, where's the best place to put our business, but it's, where can we put our business that is going to allow for long-term sustainable interaction with the coastal ocean. And so, that's, I don't know if that's spaghetti on the wall, it's kind of open-ended. I think that that's where we can get and picture any time that someone's doing something in the coastal ocean. I think there's miles to go with respect to optimizing when and where they do it.
That's really great. And I think that's going to be really incredible stuff to help support with optimizing marine spatial planning. So
Yep.
Really good stuff. And I think that ties into kind of some of the next questions. And I know that a lot of people are wondering, they know that you guys are have open positions for ocean scientists. Would love to hear a little bit more about that. And then also a question was, when you're looking for new team members, do you consider people from other earth sciences with the right technical skills, but without an extensive ocean science background? And for example, I know some of you all have different backgrounds and different skill sets. So, and then I think I saw someone raise their hand. We'll get to Jade after that.
I actually want to, so Grant, you know, is coming from this non-ocean science sphere and has given Scoot massive advisement and planning for what it means to connect the ocean data through to risk and finance. And I think, Grant, so I'm going to put you on the spot. You have a pretty interesting take on, like, you know, the Scoot's building risk and finance. Are we looking for finance professionals? Are we looking for MBAs, right? Like, there, maybe you could share a little bit of the kinds of things that have come up in conversations for new hires.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously you're trying to build a business that hasn't existed before. So there's not a simple off-the-shelf profile of what people need to do. Any data-intensive small company is going to look at people who have kind of quantitative and technical skills. That's going to be a bedrock always, right? But you know, another question is like, how did other fields with similar sort of technical skills pivot towards having more wider economic applications? So like in the 1970s, if you had a PhD in physics, you had to just be a physicist for the most part. I mean, there wasn't the expectation that, okay, those people have generalizable skills that we could go put to use in the world of finance, for example. And there's always been some fields that like have that pipeline ready-made for them. If you go to Colorado School of Mines, you kind of know what you're going to do. You're going to go explore for oil around the world. Like, but ocean science doesn't really have that today. And so in that sense, like it's kind of wide open. Like what makes ocean scientists, this is a thesis for us, is that it's really valuable to have ocean scientists working on these types of economic problems more generally across the world. And what makes them valuable is that they have really domain expertise alongside technical capabilities. Excuse me, my 2-year-old's just shown up. Hi, Van. I'm on a call right now, so let me talk to you in a little bit. Okay. Hey. Yeah, so anybody who has domain expertise that's easily applicable to these types of problems and can go like get the data that they need all on their own, that's a great combination no matter where it's coming from.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add in also that, yeah, so ocean scientists, it'd be great to hire on ocean scientists, but that shouldn't rule out people from the earth science field or applied math. I think one of the things that we really focus on hard is how do you actually make that final connection from doing data analysis to the needs of the customer? And we need someone or people who are willing to, one, take that leap outside of academia, which is a significant leap. So there needs to be that level of open-mindedness. And we also need people who are willing to look at the problem from someone else's perspective, from the perspective of the customer, to at least consider them in doing the analysis, think, what is the end goal of this? Like, how do we actually turn this into a functional, usable product? Because so much of some of the work that I've done in particular in the past has been, well, it could be used for this thing, but it never actually is implemented. So for us, we're always trying to think of what is a practical way to use this, and how will it end up serving the customer best.
Great. How to make ocean science into actionable tools for industry clients, right?
And you're not gonna, I was like, you're not gonna know that going into it, at least for us. It wasn't like in graduate school, many ocean scientists at all spend time working on industry problems. And that's a little different than friends that are in engineering departments or friends that are in physics departments, and so or in econ departments. So just a willingness to say, I'm going to take that leap, and I can learn about cash flow modeling. Like, I can learn about how ocean data maybe connects through to the total amount of salmon harvested in a different place. A willingness to learn that is what we're looking for.
Yeah, John, you totally teed me up for that, and I didn't take it. But yeah, in general, like, I don't know, the math behind insurance and finance is not nearly as complicated as the math you're already doing, right? Like, it definitely is not, and it just takes someone patient to explain it to you, or someone incredibly impatient, like in the first 2 years of like a junior professional program at a bank. Like, yeah.
Great. I think actually that leads into two questions that we have that I think are pretty related. Just talking more specifically about how your business works, and well, I'll just read off the question. So first off, do you operate on a project-to-project basis, as in consulting, or do you sustain customers with prolonged service? And then the follow-up is, did you have to give up any of your priorities from the passion project phase in order to focus on your customers' needs?
Yeah, well, so for the project to get rolling, because we were starting from scratch, to get rolling, we started with consulting projects. And these were consulting projects where we didn't know it. For one customer, they had us head to head with several other consulting groups working on the same data set. And they wanted to see, right, like, what will you come up with? And I should say, Scoot won, hands down. We did the best. But for example, we were competing with a group from IBM that IBM has weather competency and has machine learning competency and stuff, and we were told, no, the ocean perspective and treating our farms as sort of existing in a greater ocean context has been really important to making the data analysis useful. So we started with consulting projects, and now we're in this phase where we are now developing, instead of bespoke dashboards for data management, it's really our platform that is more viable to go from kind of enterprise customer to enterprise customer. We needed the consulting projects to learn a lot, and we have strong partnerships right now helping us with the product development. But no, we see the pain points showing up again and again and again with different customers, and so there's we can move away from the consulting standpoint. Once you get into the risk and finance side of things, it does a bit go back to project, but we see also some pain points that show up again and again that we think we can develop in-house new products for kind of standardizing the kinds of contracts that we have to work through, and the kinds of problems that different customers will bring to the table.
I want to add on to that a little bit too. So many of the customers that we've worked with initially had a dismissive kind of perspective where it was, oh, don't worry about the ocean science. We'll just use business intelligence tools to figure that out. And the thing is, it doesn't work. Like, you need to have some amount of domain expertise to actually bring context to the data that they're using. So that was a critical thing that we ended up learning over the past year or so. I'm going to jump to the other question too about, what did we give up when it was a passion project? Give up's a harsh word a little bit. I totally get it. But I mean, in the world that we're in now, everyone refers to it as a pivot. So we pivoted away from, okay, do we really just want to run different kinds of hardware and get more sensors in the water and collect more data? Is that where we want to go? Or is it that there already is an existing amount of data out there that isn't being utilized to its fullest? And I think after time, that was kind of what we realized. It was that, oh, actually we can do more with what already exists, and cater it specifically to these groups that need help with it. So what I want to also say is, I will always be in favor of hardware and sensors. I love that technology. That's like what still drives me. And I think that collecting ocean data is never going to stop being important. But that said, other people are already doing that super well. They have the resources to make the hardware, to run the hardware and all that. But actually linking that last step, that last bit of collecting the data, doing the analysis, but actually delivering it to the end user in a usable way that's like functional for them, that's where we found our niche.
Excellent, thank you. I think we have a couple good questions left for the group. Here's one. Any advice on when to apply for industry positions near the end of your PhD? Academic postdocs sometimes need some lead time. So do you have any advice on that?
I'm happy to go on that too.
Do you nod in your head?
Yeah, this has been, and please don't take offense to this, but for the most part, working with academics has been slow. There isn't the same turnaround in hiring speed that we've found with software engineers, for instance. I mean, we've gotten for software engineer applications within the course of 3 weeks, we've gotten them and had them on the staff. But I haven't seen the same kind of quickness and response rates to the ocean science positions. That said, I am shocked and amazed how many people have already applied for this job. So thank you for those who did. And it's really heartening and like inspiring to see. So I'm just excited that jobs like this are available, because this kind of goes back. But when I at least finished up school, I had applied for something around 25 jobs, like very, very specific to ocean science, hardware, engineering kind of stuff. And it took me over 1.5 years to finally get the job at Scripps. And so much of that was a combination of like, I don't know, I'll round it to the first dozen or so were just no responses until I really sat down with the career services folks and got help with my resume and cover letter and tuned them more for business applicants or applications. And yeah, it took a long time. So apply early and apply often.
I'll just quickly add there. My first job after my PhD was modeling emerging lawsuits. So basically the search for the next asbestos, and I was making quantitative models of that. That's pretty different than El Nino, La Nina risk transfer that I was working on. And at the time, the reason that I got connected with that was through a headhunter. And at the time I'd said to the headhunter, like, listen, guys, this is not my field of expertise. I don't really have anything to add here. But it was actually a really cool problem. And headhunters are motivated to try and make those connections. And so like it's worth throwing your resume out to folks who work in insurance or reinsurance or other sorts of domain specific or sector specific headhunters.
Yeah, just for me, it's been pretty incredible to see the opportunities for individuals that care about climate and oceans that are in the insurance space. I was shocked I didn't know that it existed, but they're meteorologists and modelers and actually just really good communicators about climate change and the kinds of things that you see in your seminars at Scripps, there's a pathway in the insurance and reinsurance space to continue working on those problems. And I didn't know that that existed. When I finished, I started teaching. So I was teaching and doing like the lecturing route, and that was like the easy path, right? Instead of, it took a while to find out about all these opportunities in industry.
Great. Thank you. And I think we have a final question, pretty specific, talking about, do you think you will be able to sponsor work visas in the future, or any thoughts on this issue? I think probably in light of everything that's going on.
We would like to. Right now, it's not something that we can do. It's beyond our capacity. But again, kind of going back to that, recognition that the aquaculture industry has this global footprint. What we've found is there's a lot of opportunity all around the world to work on ocean risk, and a lot of the the best oceanographers and the best people for assessing those risks are going to live outside of the US. They're going to be in the parts of the world where you have emerging aquaculture markets. And so we're highly motivated to work with, to have international applicants and have international employees. Just right now, just because we're so early stage, we don't have the resources yet to do it, but we see doing that in the future.
Great. I think that's all the questions we've had. I will just turn it back over to you three if you'd like to make any final comments or calls to action for the group.
Oh, Evan, you're on mute. Yeah.
You'd think I'd have practiced Zoom. Anyway, it's great to see all these faces again. I'm so glad you guys were able to join us. Follow us on all the different social media platforms. We're on there. We're not posting a ton, but you can at least keep up to date with what we're doing. And check out our website. It is new. It's different than what you saw maybe a week ago, and different from the logo that John had posted on at the very beginning. So there's lots of aspects of the business that we're still working on like that.
Also, just reach out. I'm going to volunteer everyone. I think everyone on our team is really open to having discussions with ocean scientists or people who've been thinking about the oceans, talking about answering questions about career path and just things that we've seen as we've been building Scoot. And I think Evan and I have that perspective of being deep in oceanography, and then Grant really does have this perspective of coming from a different field, but experiencing and seeing the value in oceanography and ocean data. And I think that the rest of our team too, there's diverse backgrounds. Everyone would be happy to talk with you. For informational interviews. A lot of times informational interviews eventually lead into relationships that turn into jobs. So I think it's, we're pretty friendly, and I encourage you to contact us.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Thank you to our panelists and for spending the time and hosting this. And thank you all for your attendees and your participations and your great questions. And we look forward to many more of these interactive sessions. And yes, if you have any questions or follow-up, feel free to reach out to me or any of the panelists. So thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Ciao.